Okay, so we implemented storage, but now we have a problem down here that says for detail item, it says cannot assign item to type and as date. What this is in our segue is a way to present the data without having to show it, transfer it through the segue itself. Rather, we'll transfer the object and the next view controller will handle presenting the data instead of us, for example, getting the UI elements in the segue itself in this prepare function right here and doing it from this controller. Instead, we'll give the destination view controller the power and the workload to change the labels, the detail labels and stuff. So here we have one for that default description label. That is, it's this one right here. This one right here. And we're going to have to add a few more, remember, because we have quantity, we have name, and we also have this description. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add some labels here. So let's add this the side-by-side one. They're connected already, so don't worry about them switching. Also automatically they'll work. And you have something like this. So we're going to have a few labels, simple static labels, nothing more, nothing less. Let's say item name by default. Hold on, that's not right. Just put that right there. We'll make it pretty later, so don't worry about that. And we're going to have a label quantity. This will be a static one. And we'll also have one for the number itself, because remember it's an integer. And we'll just put default 0, 0. I'm going to center align it. You get the idea. Okay, so now we're going to connect these to our viewer controller. And we're going to call it item name label. It's going to be outlet UI label. And the same goes for this number. So you hold control, not command, control. You drag it with your mouse. You hold the mouse button, you drag it, and it'll give you this little pop-up, and you name it properly. So let's call it item quantity label. Okay. Press enter there. Okay, so next part we have is the configure view function. This will update this user interface based on which item was pressed instead of passing it through the segue itself. Remember we said this view controller will handle loading the data. So here, down here for detail item, the one that's checked up here, it's going to be, instead of n as date, it's going to be item. Because remember before, by default, it was the item. And now we have to alter this code here. So what's going on here, it's a little interesting. I've never seen this before in programming because you have it and you just find a constant and then everything. So what's going on here is we check the detail item, we check if it exists and everything, and then within that item, based on that item's data rather, we have a label. We set the variable for label, the let, we set a constant, and then we define what text is to be put in that label. So you'll have a couple of these. So I'm just gonna copy these if statements. So it's kind of hard to explain, but just know for the more labels you have, the more if statements you'll have. So you use that default template. So you have if label equals, let's say here, item name label. So if we are working with the item name label, we're going to set the details to item name. And our implementation dictates that this detail variable, this object right here, is passed from our segue, which is an item of the, it's an object of the item type that we defined. So you should get autofills for item name here. And then we do the same for the item quantity. So item quantity label. and here will be quantity. And instead of description from the default implementation, we're going to have item description. Save it. So now we set up our detail view. That should be all fine now. Let me just check over here, my master view controller. And let's see. It should work now. Let me build this. It shouldn't complain anymore. Let me just see where the error is. And yep, here we go. The next thing we have to do is working on the cells. So now the master view controller is complaining that we have the cells not set up properly. Let me just see, what's this for? Item to NS table. Let me see, where is that NS date? There's one missing here. Detail item. It shouldn't complain anymore because I changed it. So let's see, detail item. I think it doesn't need the question mark anymore because the question mark means it's expecting that, but not exactly. Actually, it does need the optional. There we go. So save that. Let me just see where that build fail is. And object doesn't have description anymore. Okay, great. Now I got rid of that. It was sometimes the references to certain parts of the project get lost or confused, so you have to kind of rebuild a couple times in order to get them to work. It's kind of slow sometimes because it tries its best to do something in real time, quote unquote. So now what we're going to do is we're going to alter this cell, the cells. So this bad boy right here, we're going to alter that to accommodate the title and the quantity. What we're also going to do is we're going to store these values sort of like in the background for each cell so we can segue into this detail screen properly. This will have us change the table view for the cells, self-generating cells based on information, and we'll also be transferring certain data to through the segue. So let's move on to programming the class file for the cells. So we're gonna have to make a new file, not a class file, like a Swift file for defining how cells are defined. So for defining how cells are defined, rather for representing cells in our application. So let's move on to that. So let's make a new file, another Swift file, right like this, and we're gonna call it item u table UI cell, something like that. UI table cell. This class this file represent our cells. So we're gonna need to import. So import. We're gonna need UI kit now. UI kit. We're gonna have a class. It's gonna be called exactly like the file name. So item UI table cell, capital I, UI table cell. Its superclass is going to be UI tables view cell. I should have put a view in there, but whatever. So in here, we're going to be connecting our storyboard's cell prototypes with this particular class. But first, we're going to have a few variables. So we're going to have var item name, string, var item quantity, string, and var item description. So what these will be used for is they'll be used in the segue. Now, I'm sure there are multiple ways to do this, but for the segue purpose, I figured having properties inside the cell itself to be transferred through the segue is the easiest implementation for our intents and purposes. It's quick for smaller applications, maybe not for bigger ones. where there's lots of data, because it might be really slow to pass these a bunch of properties inside the cell along with the data, along with the other ones there. So actually we need to set them, we need to set them to null, because this is how the UI table cells work. These will be set in the segue, so don't worry about that. So they have a default value, string, string, and you expect a empty quote for now. And now we also have, let me save it, we're going to open the storyboard, and we're going to connect this class to our prototype cell. So you open your storyboard, you select the cell, so you can do it here on the branch in the tree, and you go over to this tab right here, the third tab for the class, and you select the item UI table cell class we created. And be sure it inherits module from target. That way you can drag the UI elements into the Swift file. So I'm going to have to manually do it here sometimes because this ID gets confused. So I'm going to go to Manual, Item Manager, and I'm going to use Select Item UI Table Cell. And I'm going to try to drag into here. And if it doesn't work, I'll show you what you can do. Let me see. So it's going to be item name label. Yeah, so it won't work. So what you can do, you can just do it manually. What you have to do basically, if you don't want to do it manually, you have to clean the project, but I'll show you how to do it manually so we all know. So you have IB outlet, var week. We're basically doing the drag manually, and we're going to call it item name label. It's going to be a UI text view, exclamation point, so strictly an UI text view. And you should be able to drag, I think it should be week var actually, my bad. Week var, yeah, there we go. And then you could drag, see this node right here, you could drag it to the element, I believe. Hold on a sec. Item name label, let me see if I could drag it in there. I think I could drag it through the tree. Oh, hold on. Item UI text view, let me see. Oh, rather, it's not text view, it's UI label, excuse me. I'm thinking of the description for something else later. UI label, it should match types here. All right, so now you should be able to drag it. I think you could drag it into here. Yep, you can. There you go. So now they're connected. And what we're gonna do now, we're gonna add the quantity to the cell prototype. Let me see if I could zoom in. Hold on a sec. Hide that. Zoom in. Because this title's taking up all the space. There we go. I managed to do it by just resizing it. Okay, so that's kind of silly, but we'll put a number here for a placeholder. And we will set it to left aligned. So you go over here in the properties, you can just set left align here. Whoops. And we don't want that. So clear restraints. And up, there we go. Never mind, forget what I did. Let's put it center. Like that for now. There we go. So now we have a title, and we have the number. And we have to reference the number as well. So we have another label. So it's gonna be IB outlet week var item quantity label of the type UI label, strictly UI label, and we can connect it like so. And watch the name change. Up, there we go. So now we set up our cell view, and we can move back to the master view controller to set up the generation of cells. So we're gonna go over here, we're gonna go back to single view mode, and we're gonna get into here and change this up a little. we're back in the master view controller, and we've scrolled down here to this override function table view, cell for row at. So if you've worked with Swift before, you can generate cells by having override function from the table view. In this case, it's auto-generated, saves us a lot of time, which is great, but we have our own cells made. So we have to fix that. So here in the default implementation, we had object.description, but we don't have that anymore, nor do we have the cell.text label. What we're going to do here is we're going to get rid of this. So we already have the dequeued reusable cell added, so we don't have to mess with that. So all you do is set the properties of the cell. So cell, you have stuff like, it should have, oh, we forgot one very important thing I forgot to do. So we forgot to connect the cell prototype to the proper UI view. Wait, hold on a sec. There it is. And what we need to do inside the master view controller, we have the type. So we need to add here, let cell dequeue reusable cell as, what is it called? Item UI table cell. I believe it has to have a strict here. Yes, it does. So strict type of item UI cell so that we can have the cell populated with item names and quantities. So we have cell, so the cell we referenced up above, dot item name label dot text equals. So text exclamation point means we're directly inputting the value. While this may not be a recommended practice, it gets the job done, and for little apps, it really isn't a big deal. So we'll just stick with that. If it's not broken, it works. So if it works, it's not stupid and stuff like that. So let's get into this. So we're going to have object. Remember, this object is an item now. As you can see, here the type is item, and you can access item name directly. It's a string being set to a string, and there we go. So we shouldn't have any complaints from Xcode. And we do the same thing for item quantity label, text, exclamation point, strictly unwrapping the text. So we have object dot item quantity. So keep in mind this object is an item. We just left this based on the default implementation to save us some time. Okay, so the next thing we have is these stored elements. Hold on. These ones right here. These will be passed into the segue. So what we need to do is also declare them here as well. So you have cell item name, not item name label. It's a string set to object dot item name. Cell item quantity equals object item quantity. Cell item description equals object item description. This is the data that's not displayed in the table view cell, and it's a requirement for this application. So each cell will have its description stored kind of behind the scenes within the cell, but it'll be transferred once you tap on the cell to the detail view. Okay, so we set up our cells defined here, and I think the next thing we got to do is the segue. We just have to, let me just review this a little bit. Let me build two just to see if there's any complaints from Xcode. And I don't think there are. Yeah, we're good. So I think we're ready to build. But before I do that, I'm just going to change the names up here from master. So you can go up to your, instead of master, you could click it and say items, because that's what the list is, the list of items. So instead of master, it goes back to items now. It changes to items. And I think that's it. Let me just check. And I think we're ready to build our first variant of this app. So what it's going to do, instead of generating the dates is going to generate items with quantities, item names, and some sample detail that you don't see in the table cell, but rather you see in the details. So where is it defined? In the insert new object. So we'll have a bunch of auto-generated items when we press the plus button with the count incrementer. Oh, one thing I forgot to increment the counter. So apparently there's no count like plus plus like in Java and JavaScript and C++ and stuff like that. So you just do it like this. We just do count plus equals 1, and this apparently I tried plus plus, it doesn't work, it complains. So once you add a new item, you increment the counter, and so each item is sort of unique. It has a unique name, has a unique item quantity, and it has a unique description. All right, so I think we are now ready to build this app. So we built it, and now we can run it. Okay, so here's our app so far. So notice here items has changed, and when we click the plus button, a new item is generated. So based on our custom specifications, item number 0 with count 0, and the counter increases as you can see. We can delete them. Delete. We add a new one. We didn't implement a counter that goes back, but that's not needed. This is just for demonstration purposes. So press done, and when you tap on one, you notice you get the item number. The interface is a little bad because I didn't fix it properly, but you get the idea. So the data is transferred to the detail. So you have the description that's not seen in the cell displayed here, and the quantity is displayed, and the item number is displayed, and so on. So we finished the first sort of half of the application, I guess you could say. What we need to be able to do now is, instead of just auto-generating like this, we need to change the functionality of the plus button. And what it's going to do is, like we discussed before, is it's going to lead us to another view that contains a form that is going to allow us to input new data for a new item, along with the validation for said item. So we should not be able to submit an empty item, and we should not be able to submit string data for the numbers. So we're going to get into that now. So let's get back to Xcode and begin with that.